If you're watching on social media, you're going back and listening to this on a podcast platform, thank you so much. Go ahead and share this with a friend. Make sure that you subscribe to the Living Well channel and subscribe to KHEA Radio, however you get your podcast. I'm excited. We have some guests in studio. Here we go. Good morning. This is KHEARadio.com, 99.5 FM. This is Kickstart. My name is Gardy. I got a guest in studio. I got two guests, but I got one who's pretty much the man every Tuesday. Good morning, sir. Introduce yourself.
Oh, my name is Dr. Aaron Chapa. It's great to be here. I feel great to know that I am the man today.
The man.
Yeah, that feels really good. You just made my insides feel like a little jump, a little jolt. I think I needed that, so I appreciate the vouch of confidence there. Good morning, everybody. This is Living Well Clinical Nutrition Center. We are excited to be on KHEA Radio this morning. This is a fun ride that we've been on for the last couple of years, sharing wellness, sharing health, teaching people how to live well and be well one bite at a time. It's all about food. You guys know that one of my fundamental core philosophies is that all life starts and stops at the cellular level, and nutrition is the fundamental backbone that either drives your body off the rails or drives your gene code to express life and vitality. We are excited to bring a message to you today and just be moving this podcast in a direction that it better serves our audience. We want people to recognize that you can go back and listen to this show anytime, anywhere, as long as you download the podcast app. We're on different social media platforms. We're on YouTube. I believe we're on Spotify. So just make sure that you're tuning in to all the different venues, and I'll have Gardy put it in our little drop post banner at some point so that we can get this information to you anytime, anywhere that you're ready to roll. So good morning, and I have a very special friend in the office. In the office, we're in the office. We're in our office, and his name is Dr. Arland Hill. And him and I he graduated a little bit ahead of me, and we've been out in the trenches serving people for quite some time. How you doing this morning, bro?
I'm doing great,
man. I know you made a trip down. Where'd you drive in from?
So I'm over in East Texas, a little community over there called Hillister.
Yeah. So East Texas. So you shared something a moment ago, and I think that it's just an interesting little thought. Tell us that little that thing about Hillister that maybe we might not recognize, being that we're city folk.
Yeah. So when I first moved out that way, we found a map of the county, and it was broken down into cities, towns, and communities. And we didn't make the city or town list. We only made the community list.
But at the end of the day, isn't that kind of cool, right? Like, all great things have to have a solid community. We're in a homeschool program, and one of the Jennifer Withy actually always told me it's about the community. So what is the community? What is community life like up there? What is it that you're doing with yourself these days?
Yeah, so we've got a regenerative agriculture ranch up there. You mentioned our experience in the trenches and dealing with patients, and probably 4 years ago now, we realized that there was a consistent theme that I was hearing with patients where they were saying, look, you tell me about these good foods and what I need to be eating, but actually finding those is turning out to be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, isn't it?
And so I said, that is a pretty consistent theme I'm hearing, and it's time we do something about this. And so back in 2017, we started Harvest Hills Ranch, and we did that with the mindset that we were going to be the outlet and the source for individuals that were looking for a clean, nutrient-dense food source.
Wow. And so, so you've got, I guess, produce, you've got animals, what's all out there on the ranch that you're working with?
Yeah, so our primary focus is going to be grass-fed finished beef, pastured poultry, our pastured egg-laying chickens, and then ducks for eggs from them as well. And then we do have a vineyard and an orchard as well as a market garden.
A vineyard like wine?
Well, it can be used to produce wine.
We were just recently up in the hill country, and I didn't realize how many vineyards were on every corner. That's like a big thing.
Oh yeah.
And I know people drink a lot of wine and stuff like that, but I don't think I realized how much. But that's kind of cool. So so you got ducks, chickens, beef, but you said something about the chickens. You've got free range chickens and then egg-laying chicken. So those aren't one and the same?
No, they're not. There's actually a mix here. So you have what are known as pure meat birds, and they have different genetics.
Okay.
They produce extremely fast. They get up to weight really fast. We typically only keep them about 7 weeks. So it's a very quick turnaround. And then you have egg-laying chickens on the opposite end, and they're strictly for egg production. And then you can have these birds in the middle, which can be used for both, but it's sort of splitting hairs with those groups. So it's better just to have a pure meat bird or a pure egg-laying bird.
So, I mean, it's 7 weeks, and they're ready to go.
They're ready to go.
The meat birds.
Yes.
Wow. Well, you don't know this, and I didn't know this until I was sat down to eat. But this weekend we were in Georgia. Me, Jennifer, Molly, Dr. Amber, and they drove, Molly and Jennifer, and Dr. Amber and I flew. But on Saturday night we had, Saturday night. I can't remember now. It's okay. It was a lot has happened in the last 72 hours. But there were these. Jennifer brought these 2 packages of like wings, and
chicken wings.
Yeah, and I was like, man, those look pretty good. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. We're experimenting with some battering and some playing with nutrients. We had some arrowroot, so we kind of put them in arrowroot. We put a little bit of garlic and onion powder with it, and there was a grill at this place we were at, so we started grilling them up, and I'm just telling you how we did it, because I'm normally in my rudimentary way. I mean, I want to douse it with fats and butter and bacon grease, and I mean I want to put all kinds of stuff on it. Well, we're doing some experimenting by cutting some of that stuff out, so we didn't do any of it. So like it's on the grill, and I'm literally like basting it like with water, to keep it moist. And it was about 25 minutes that I had them cooking, and when we sat down to eat, dude, I found out that they were his chickens. And so I'm like, well, give me 3. and they weren't your like standard like little bitty wing. I mean, they were meaty, and they were delish. I was truly like blown away. I could have eaten 6 more of them.
And those are 7 weeks old? Is that what you said?
Those are 7 weeks old.
And tell us the process, because Jennifer and Molly told me a little bit about like how this works. And guys, I share this because people don't appreciate what they're buying at the store, that it just shows up magically at their storefront, and they go to the grocery store and you buy it. And nowadays, you can go online and buy this stuff and go and pick it up outside the store, and you don't even have. I mean, we're getting so disconnected. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. That is one of my biggest things, and that's also one of our underlying missions, is to reconnect people with their food, because the more distant we get from our food and from the production of our food and actually taking an active role in it, the more we can have slip bias, the more we can be told is acceptable with our food supply, and basically have the wool pulled over our eyes of what we're actually consuming.
And sure enough, that's happening. I mean, we can tell, you and I both know, a lot of these birds that people are buying are loaded with hormones and gosh knows how many chemical processed food sources that they're getting into, and we just don't appreciate that those things that are in those birds get into us.
Right.
What they eat, you're eating, right?
Right. That's absolutely right.
And so, I mean, you've got to be mindful. I mean, if you got a bird, I mean, what's the standard? Because like your birds are 7 weeks. Can you do it faster?
You can. In fact, in the conventional world, they do it in 5 to 6 weeks.
Okay.
And
how do they do that?
Okay. So
this is good. And remember, everything he's about to tell you, that is coming into you when you eat it.
Yeah, so let me illustrate a big difference on this, because if anyone listening hasn't done this, I would actually recommend going to Google and just typing in commercial chicken house, so you can actually get a true visualization of what I'm getting ready to say to you. But these houses, they're extremely long, and they house anywhere from about 27 to 30,000 birds in one house.
Good gracious.
Now, that's a lot of birds.
That's a lot of birds.
Now, and most farms have on average at least 4 of these houses. And so you think 4 times 30, you're 120,000. You're basically looking at every 5 to 6 weeks, they're turning 120,000 birds. Okay. Now, in the mobile coops that we use on our pasture, we're looking at 30 birds is what we're topping out at. So 30,000 versus 30, and we're moving these birds every day. So it's a much different model comparatively than what the conventional system is. When we're moving those birds, we're giving them fresh grass every day, and we actually start them out in what we call a brooder. So we have to attend to make sure that they have an adequate amount of space in that brooder. We control their environment, and then when they hit that 2.5 to 3 week age, we can move them out to pasture, and they finish their entire life on the pasture, or finish the rest of their life on pasture.
Wow. Okay. So I'm fascinated with, biology. I guess that's just how you and I are wired, right? We just like how things evolve and come together. And so, and so if these guys can do this in 5 to 6 weeks, they're manipulating something.
You have to.
And so what is it that they're manipulating?
So a couple of things on this. So you have to, first of all, understand that when they're in these environments, in these closed environments where you're not allowing the chickens to express their normal chicken activity, right? We want to keep what we might call the chickenness of the chicken, if you will, right?
Which I would envision would be pecking the ground, looking for worms.
Yeah. Scratching, doing the things that chickens do, right? Those animals are not allowed to do that in that conventional model. So by virtue of that, you have to have inputs that are going to influence that. So some of the things that they do have antibiotics that they introduce into these in different ways, because otherwise you've got them in a crowded space. You would have various bacterial diseases spreading rampantly in that environment.
Because they're sitting in their stuff.
They're just sitting in their manure, whereas you compare that to what we do, whatever they defecate over a 24-hour time frame, the next morning they get moved. And so now they've got completely clean pasture
to work with,
right? And that happens every single day.
So will a bird sitting like in that big, what'd you call it, the chicken house?
The conventional chicken house.
Conventional chicken house. If they're sitting in their stuff, are they smart enough to know not to peck into the ground, or do they stick their head right in the ground?
They'll still peck into it.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, in fact,
so not only are they getting antibiotics, they're getting, excrement.
They're getting excrement too. In fact, one of the things that
I hope their buddy next to him had a good meal last night. I think is what you're trying to tell me.
Yeah. Well, they're all having the same meal because that's going to be a controlled feed source, right?
Yeah.
So they're only letting a certain feed come through there, which is predominantly corn, soy based. So it's a grain based feed, which most people are going to look at that and say, well, I only want chickens that are on grass and that are eating grass. And the reality of that is that a chicken is not a cow. They don't have the same digestive system. So that chicken is a high energy bird. They do require some type of high energy input, and grains meet that. So grains are should not be considered an absolute no-no for chickens. For cows and for ruminant animals, you don't want grains in their model of food consumption. But chickens are different, so they can get away with some of that. What it really comes down to, and this is a common theme that we teach even to the patients, is where's that grain coming from? And so right now we're literally starting, just to tell you how difficult it is to find this, we're starting to source non-GMO grains out of Georgia. We live in Texas, right? And so I'm having to find the farms and the feed mills that I'm comfortable with. I have to go all the way to Georgia
to get it.
And
we're talking how much? I mean, how much feed do you think you're going through?
For just our laying birds, we have 120 laying birds right now, and that's actually not including the ducks. We're about 150 if you factor all those in, and so we're doing over 1,000 pounds a month in feed, and that's just the laying birds. That's not even the meat birds.
Golly, so I mean, that means non-GMO, and so these birds are getting a very clean source of grain that they can get access to. I heard you say that every day they're starting with fresh pasture.
Yep.
And I think that, that just sounds normal. I mean, I think that sounds great.
Yeah.
And so what if you put a commercial bird and your bird up to each other, I mean, what would they look like in comparison?
So what you would see is that our bird would be a healthier looking bird just in general. One thing that comes to mind for me on this with your question is that there's actually something now called chicken lice, and it affects the meat. You can see it sometimes when you have, say, for example, a thigh or a chicken breast. In the store, it'll have a spot on it, and it just won't look right. That's lice is what caused that. Ooh. Animals that have good nutritional status don't have that, and they have an immune system.
Yeah.
They're not burdened by parasites like that.
And so, I mean, so that obviously just shows the quality of the meat when you can see that. See, I think people just assume that what they're getting wouldn't have those things. I mean, they don't have, I guess they don't have good enough controls to make sure all those things are not present in what is showed us up at the grocery stores?
Well, they control to the extent that they can, but
yeah, if it's obviously bad, they're chunking it, right? But I wonder how much waste too. You know, like how much is actually wasted.
So this brings up another important topic, which is money, right? It always comes back to money.
Yeah.
Right. And in that model, you're never going to waste anything. And so let's say that chicken doesn't make the grade for human consumption. It goes to the animal market. Well, I'm an animal lover. I have dogs. I don't want them eating poor food either. Right.
Right.
And so I'm not satisfied with that. But
that's you because you're educated.
Yeah.
But the average consumer is just going and buying the cheapest pate and calling it a day.
Well, and so let me extend a little bit further on this. And so this brings up a concept that I call race to the bottom. And this is what most consumers don't think about when they buy food. They want to look at, say, for example, what we produce, which I think is still reasonably priced, and compare that to HEB or Kroger. They're not going to be the same price points. They're never going to be the same price points. And if you're willing to pay lower and lower prices for your food, then you're going to get what you're paying for. And you have to understand that. So if you're always willing to pay the lowest cost possible, expect the cheapest quality food possible.
Which, guys, basically says that if all life starts and stops at the cellular level, you're feeding your cells the cheapest, most processed, quickest to market junk available. And why would you expect your race car, your body, to rip and roar around a racetrack at 200 miles an hour and put bad gas in it, right, or have cheap parts on it? I mean, you shouldn't expect to win unless you're just a gambler and hoping to win the lottery. But I mean, most people don't win the lottery, isn't that right?
Right. That's right.
And we've got to. So what I'm hearing is there's a level of intentionality that we need to be putting into, as a consumer, our choices around food. Like, does it initially take a little extra thought? Well, of course it does.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think once you start learning the patterns and then you start finding the sources where you can reach to people that are as infatuated with the idea of quality as we are, then all of a sudden you can trust the source that's telling you, hey, this company's got something great. This, farm, and that's why we always talk about supporting a local farmer, because they're going the extra mile. I mean, I don't know if you're driving to Georgia, but I mean, you're paying those shipping costs.
Yeah.
And with everything that's been going on money-wise in the oil and gas industry, I'm sure your costs have gone up.
Indeed.
But yet there's you can't buy safety, and you sure as heck can't buy good quality if you're not willing to put the money down, for it. And so we've got to be willing to recognize that we're not buying for price. We're buying for quality as much as we can afford in this day and age.
Yeah, and I think consumers just have to go back and say, if I'm looking for the cheapest price point possible, then just realize you're getting what you're paying for.
So, Dr. Hill, there's been some people that have been asking on social media, and if you're going back and listening to this on a podcast, you can watch on KHEA on Living Well's YouTube channel. There's multiple ways you can get this stream.
Absolutely.
Dr. Hill, people want to know, how can they get this chicken? How can they get your products, and what do you offer?
Yeah, so you can go to harvesthillsranch.com, And there is a shop tab there. It has our complete store. You'll see all of our offerings for whether it's beef, chicken, the different eggs that we have, even the broths that we make directly from our animals. Those are available as well. I know your beef and your chicken broth are big things right now. Folks are interested in collagen. And so we have those available from our animals specifically.
So that's pretty amazing. And I hear your wife is just full of energy. And, I mean, I've just got nothing but raving compliments. And so, I mean, I'm looking forward to meeting her the next time I get the chance to come and visit the farm because, but I've seen videos of them making broths and making stuff, and I've seen them tinkering around in their garden, and so I mean I could talk to you for an hour about each little and we should maybe today's just kind of like an overview because there was something interesting that was brought up to me about your farm that I didn't realize and that we still talk about, and I feel like I got I mean you created so much excitement in my office with my staff coming to see the farm that like I'm so like I feel really jealous. I feel like they got something and I didn't get it, and as much as they tell me, as much you until you experience amazing. You can be told about it, but man, I want to be touched at the cellular level with a good experience, So, but we were talking about your cows. We were talking about you've got this long device out in there that out in your farm that has different minerals that you get from everywhere, and I want you to tell us a little bit about those minerals, but that you specifically use and why, okay? Because again, people just assume there's a cow out there. There's plenty. Every time I drive, from here to Austin or even here down the street, and you see a cow pasture and you see cows out there, that they're getting everything they need off that land. Maybe. If the landowner and the caregiver actually gives a rip, right?
Right.
And so you got to take that into consideration. Just because there's cows on that land doesn't mean that cow's healthy, even though he still pees and poops and does all. I did see something really cool on the way to the airport yesterday. It was a brisk, beautiful morning. The sun was just perfect, and I'm so fortunate. I always catch animals in the act, and there was crystal clear little stream of. Not a stream. It was like the size of your bottle of water there, pee, being pierced by the sun's rays, sparkling. And I was like, that's awesome. I wish my video camera would have been going. You know what I mean? But going back to your farm is those minerals, 1, why do you have them there? 2, where do you get them? 3, and then tell us about the nature of the animals, some of the products that they go to themselves innately. It's like it's in them to know when they're deficient.
It really is. I tell you, from when we started raising cattle to now, what I have learned about these animals just from observation, it would be completely mind-boggling to the average individual.
It's like bird watching, but it's for cows.
It's for cows, right? I mean, these animals are incredibly in tune with their environment, and they know how to manipulate their environment and consume. When I say that, I mean consume the right things for that moment in time to meet their nutritional needs. Whatever challenges, whether that's weather, cold, hot, too much wind, whatever it is that they're facing at that moment, they will self-select what is in front of them in the pasture. So to ultimately get to your question about the mineral trough that we use, let me set the stage on our pastures first of all, because you have to understand this to understand that. So when you look at our pastures look probably shabby to the average rancher, but that's intentional. And when I say that, what most people do that raise cattle are they will try to have a single type of grass that they emphasize in their pasture. Well, we don't do that. We like to have diversity. And the analogy I like to use for this is, let's say I give you one of my hamburgers and I tell you have to eat one of my hamburgers. As good as that hamburger is, you have to eat that hamburger every day for every meal for the next 2 months. Well, you're going to get tired of eating hamburger after a while, right? Within absolutely. 2 or 3 days, you're going to get burned out on that. You want diversity in your diet.
Yeah.
Those animals are the same way. They want diversity in their diet. And so we allow all of the plants that are inherent to our environment, whether that's grasses, whether it's legumes that tend to be higher in nitrogen, whether it's forbs that most people call weeds, we allow all that stuff to grow because my cows have never come up to me and said, you know, that weed over there, that just ain't my thing today. Can you get rid of that for me? Most of the time, they're going to actually take a few bites off of it because there's some medicinal value in that at some level.
So medicinal, meaning it's like almost okay to take a little bit of herbs in our body to activate different systems.
That's exactly right.
And I think that is something that I'm trying to get across to my patients at the fundamental level is like using herbs or weeds or forbs, F-O-R-B-E?
B-S, just F-O-R-B-S.
Okay. And so, you know, using these different plants to activate our immune system, our metabolism, our hormonal system, every part of us, right?
Right. And just so, for example, some of the ones that folks will recognize that we have growing sometimes, we have echinacea growing, we have dandelions growing out there.
And echinacea is great for what?
It's immune system stimulant.
Yeah.
You know, these animals have a diversity of forage that they get to choose and sample from. And so even beyond that, if you come to our farm, and I'm sure your staff probably mentioned this, is that we are constantly moving our animals. So if you come to my farm and you look at my cattle are not going to be spread all over a pasture. They're going to mimic how nature does this. If you think in your mind about when you've seen grazing animals out on the plains of Africa, so for example, the wildebeest or any of these other animals, they move in herds. Hence the name a herd of cattle, right?
Correct.
They move in herds. They put a lot of pressure on the ground, but they're moving. And so we mimic that. We want them to put a lot of pressure on a small area, and then as soon as they've exhausted out that grass, we get them to the next area. And so that may mean that we move them once a day. It may mean we move them 3 or 4 times a day. It just depends on where we're at. So for right now, we're just coming out of calving season. We don't want a lot of stress on the animals. We want the calves to hit the ground without much stress. And so we don't move them as frequently. But now we're coming out of calving season. And so like yesterday, they got moved 4 times yesterday.
And it would be standard in nature. Typically, when it is calving season, they don't move as much.
They don't move as much.
So you've got literally it down to that level of healthy natural biology.
And again, we're still having this underlying theme of nutrition, right? Because that's ultimately what it comes back down to. So how does nutrition play into this? Here's the answer to that. So when those animals eat that grass, we have essentially timed their return to that area so that they are eating that grass in its peak phase of nutrition. Grass has essentially 3 phases of growth. It starts out very slow, and then it hits a middle phase where it grows extremely fast. It pulls a lot of nutrition into the plant, and then it hits a 3rd stage where the growth slows back down and it starts to develop more of a fiber content to it. So the starches begin to become more fibrous in nature. It's that middle phase, that rapid growth phase where the plant is pulling up a lot of nutrition, photosynthesizing, using the sunlight to harvest energy and to gain energy and create the sugars and the energy. That's when they hit that. That's when they hit that grass, right?
I mean, so the more active the grass is, the more active the nutrients that we get are, which in theory should activate our cells to be more rapidly turning over, getting rid of the old worn out stuff, and then regenerating the new stuff.
Right.
Restoration.
And so just to get a little esoteric at the moment, right? So that's when the plant is harvesting the sunlight, and of course sunlight creates energy. That's when the plant is going to have the most energy in it. So if you just factor in that energy in that plant translates to the energy of the cells of that animal, you've got a more healthy animal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which then when we eat the animal, we're able to maximize the animal's work that they've been doing in the fields.
That's right.
Huh. Then guys, that is just fired up because this is another piece of education. What I just heard, you have to know you have to have the biological sense to know that grass grows at different speeds and when it pulls up the nutrients at the right time, so that you have your animal over there, enjoying the luxury of that rapid metabolic grass. I mean, that's why they say don't let grass grow under your feet, I guess.
That's right. That's right.
Because if so, then you, the farmer, miss the opportunity to get your animal the maximal nutrient density possible. And being that you're doing this all natural, you're not leveraging hormones, you're not leveraging steroids or antibiotics or fake grains, pseudo foods. And Gardy, how's this work? Like when we eat make-believe food, what do we get?
You get make-believe health.
Yes, right. We get make-believe health, and we don't want make-believe health, and that's why we brought you on the show today, because we want people to recognize that, food matters. Food matters. What you put in your body matters, and nutrition will drive your health in a way that gives you the maximal opportunity to be the best version of you, the most energetic you, the most creative you possible, and that comes through food. That comes through a level of, we've got to slow down, and we've got to appreciate that there are people that are understanding the soil, understanding what's growing in that soil, and then understanding the livestock. I guess, do we call chickens livestock too?
We do.
Yeah, so anything that's living on it's okay. So I just know a little bit. I'm just over here like, okay, new vocabulary, let's bring it in, baby, bring it in, download. And so, but we're literally watching. You have to appreciate all facets of the animals living, and then the soil that you're using, and then the things that are growing. Okay, so you're still setting the stage, guys. So we haven't even got to this, and there's a reason that he's going through all this process, because it helps you in your mind's eye develop an appreciation that when you put a piece of meat in your mouth or a vegetable, that it either has the nutritional density and the molecular makeup to drive function, drive metabolism, or it doesn't.
Right.
And so keep going.
Okay. You have no doubt in these shows and in your podcasts have at some point, and probably multiple times over, talked about the gut microbiome.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Everybody knows that Dr. Chapa likes talking about poop and likes talking about things that go on down there. You know what I mean? And sometimes they even say, look, dude, you can't say poop so many times on the radio. Well, it's my job to say poop. If you knew that you would get paid to evaluate poop so much, would you have gotten into this work?
Probably, because I just enjoy the biochemistry and the functionality of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know what's really interesting is that the cattle are the same way. All the livestock are this way. When I walk out in the pastures, I'm always looking at the cow pads. I want to see what those cow pads look like. I want a certain consistency. I take the sticks, I break them up. I want to make sure that rumen has completely digested the forage that animal has taken in. So I bring up this subject about the microbiota because we understand and have at least at a minimum appreciation about how important that is for human health. Well, that whole story equally translates to the microbiome in the soil. And this is where really nutrition starts to come to life, because when those plants are photosynthesizing and taken up, any excess carbohydrates that they have, they push that out through the root system. And when they push that out through the root system, that in turn allows the fungus and the bacteria in the soil, it gives them a communication system to say, bring certain nutrients in. So literally
it uses the carbs.
It uses the carbs. They make something called exudates from this.
Okay.
And those exudates get excreted out from the root systems in the plant, and they're signalers to tell the bacteria and the microbiology in the soil to bring certain minerals and nutrients back to that plant to allow that plant to thrive.
Incredible. Dude.
It's amazing.
It's
amazing. Now, what happens, just to put a thought process out there for folks, what happens when you add an herbicide or a pesticide to this system? You break that whole process apart. Right? You disrupt the communication channel between the soil, the microorganism, the fungus, and getting that nutrient into that plant. So now when that animal goes and takes that bite of that plant, it's not as nutrient dense. And this is the real conversation that we should be having. Not just organic, not just chemical free or chemical laden. Is it nutrient dense? You can slap a USDA organic symbol on a food and it be chemical free, but it's still not nutrient dense. And the best example I can tell you on this is that we've all bitten into these carrots where they just have a bit of a soapy flavor to them. They don't taste sweet and rich like a carrot should.
That's right.
That carrot is not nutrient dense. So back to the idea of intention, we have to have intention with creating nutrient density, right?
Wow. I mean, it makes so much sense, and I got to thinking about something you said on the front end about just like a consumer bias, like we just assume that things are okay, just because you can go to your local hardware store and buy an herbicide. I mean, do you think people recognize what herbicides are, or because they're just buying a bag that says what on it? You know, that it's something that a weed killer,
right? Or
a has 3 different numbers on it that insinuate a fertilizer of sort, right?
Right.
And a lot of these things have these herbicides in it that are disrupting the cellular communication. And but Dr. Chapa and Dr. Hill, I don't have animals growing in my front yard or backyard. What does that mean to us that are living in the city? I mean, remember, you're part of a community, so I guess y'all think different than we do, right? So us city folk that have we're butted up against our neighbors' houses. We have very strict like plot lands, and my neighbor over here to the right, my neighbor in the back, and my neighbor to the left are sprinkling these junk fertilizers, these junk herbicides all over their property. And if I'm choosing not to, I mean, am I hopeless in changing my mineral content in my soil?
So everybody should just ask themselves, are you comfortable with poisoning your children? Because anytime you go to the hardware store and get one of these herbicides and spray that on your lawn, the first rain that comes through, you're washing that into the sewer system. So now when that goes into the municipal water supply, the municipal water supply does not have the ability to take those chemicals out. They're staying in there. And so now when you take a shower and you open up the pores to your body,
because
or
anytime
you
we get
inhale
hot,
that, you inhale that, you consume that water, you brush your teeth in it. Every time you do that, you're exposing yourself to those chemicals that you were comfortable with putting on your lawn just because you needed to kill a few weeds out there.
And because we've been told that weeds are bad.
Right.
Because we call them weeds and not forbs. If we call them forbs, maybe we would have a different attitude, right?
That's right.
And so I'm really experimenting with healthier fertilizers and things like that on my yard and letting things grow. And I mean, there for a while, my yard really looked, weedy, so to speak, or should I say forby. And, and so, but to your point, not just your kids, which, by the way, we should all be thinking about that. If they're walking around barefoot in these things, it's also coming up through the pores of their feet. We know there's metabolic downloads in the hands and feet. And my kids and I were doing exercises, bear crawls, and lunges in the backyard yesterday. And had we been a chemical environment, they'd be sucking that stuff up because their body temperature's rising, those pores are opening, and now not only am I creating a toxicity, I'm enhancing the mineral needs they have. Well, what if I don't know what I know and I'm not giving them extra minerals? Dude, I almost just pitched you a ball down the middle, because here it comes. You go back to the farm and tell us about. You've got all this working on the farm, guys. So he's got everything moving around, but he's got this little, what'd you call it? A mineral
trough.
A mineral trough.
Okay, so just to insert something here, as those animals, as the cattle consumes that grass, they're obviously going to defecate. That poop's going to hit the ground. 80% of what that animal consumed gets redeposited in terms of the minerals and the nutrients. It gets redeposited, right? And so literally,
like recycling.
You're cycling. You're nutrient cycling. Well, and depending on where they're at, what impact that particular plot of land has had over time from environmental stressors, it may be missing certain minerals. And depending on what phase of growth that plant is in, it may not have everything that they need at, for example, the peak of summer when it's at its hottest. That animal's metabolic needs may be slightly higher than what that plant is able to deliver at that point. So what we have is a 20-bin trough. And in each bin, there is a different mineral. There's magnesium, there's zinc, there's copper, there's cobalt, there's an acid balancer, there's a base balancer. There's just this plethora of different minerals and nutrients that they have access to. these cattle will literally go, and there's a big rubber flap over the top of it to keep the rain out, but they will take their head, stick it under there, pick that flap up, and just literally slide down that trough till they get to the mineral that they need to consume, and they will start using that mineral at the rate that they think that they need that mineral. They actually use their instincts.
Wow.
Yeah.
So have you ever like seen where like they don't touch a mineral for like I don't know how long they would not touch it, and then all of a sudden they just go to it?
We actually saw this one time with potassium. When I put the trough out, we put the trough out initially, it was in January when we did this, and we did not see the cattle touch the potassium until one day in August. I mean, literally, I would go out there and lift that flap up every day just to check the supply, and the potassium had never been touched. And I thought, well, there's something wrong with this potassium. I literally walk out there one day in August. It's
hot.
It's hot. And they had wiped out the entire bin of potassium in one day. The whole herd had wiped it out.
Wow.
There was something about that potassium that they needed at that moment, that availability was able to make up that difference for them and keep their metabolic function at its peak.
Unbelievable. I mean, to me, I think that's where we really would love to get ourselves to, where we're instinctually knowing that we need carrots or Brussels sprouts or broccoli or cabbage or some, asparagus. We need certain veggies in certain seasons. I mean, everything grows in seasons, but yet we live in a land now where we have unlimited access to all kinds of things that we never had access to before. And people think, like going back to what you were talking about earlier, the variety is good. We got a plethora of variety we can pull from, but does that equate to the same thing that you're talking about? Or is there something to the fact that we should be eating in season?
We should be eating in season. Let me use the cattle as an example on this. There are times of the year when we will harvest cattle, and there's times of the year that we don't harvest cattle. And what we always try to do, to the extent possible, and the environment and the weather dictates this from year to year a bit, so these time frames shift slightly, but we want to try to catch these animals at the peak of their nutrition. So when they have gained the most weight, and there's going to be the best flavor in the beef, there's going to be the most nutrition in that beef, and that's when we try to harvest that. We're not going to harvest animals in the dead of winter when the entire landscape is completely brown because all the grasses are dormant and the animals are just simply trying to maintain body condition at that point in the year.
What do you do? What do you do to kind of assist or help without like doing it for them or synthesizing processed junk into their realm?
Yeah, there's two things that we solely depend on. The first of which is that we use a process called overseeding. There are in our environment in Southeast Texas, as we all know, with this past year being the exception, it doesn't get that cold here, right? I mean, we don't have that many days of freezing here. So what that means is that there's a lot of opportunity for plants that are known as cool season plants to actually make it all the way through the winter. And so we can use those cool season plants. They're native here, but they have to be planted. So we have to plant those every year. But there are things that people have heard of like ryegrass. I mean, it's just that ryegrass will sustain through the entire winter. That's why a lot of folks use that on their yards because they want to keep their yards green through the winter months.
Makes sense.
So we use that, and then we also use hay, but not just any hay. We either cut our own hay if we have overages on our grass through the warm months, or we have a specific supplier that we had to do a lot of legwork and hunt down to find chemical-free hay that had not been fertilized, had not been...
Even the hay has been chemically altered.
Most hay producers actually brag about having a pure stand of hay, having used fertilizers and herbicides.
Which, by the way, that's another input into us as humans, our children, our grandparents, our parents, the generational line.
Right.
And so now not only are we walking on the stuff, planting with it in the yard, in the soils of our planting, but now we're also eating it. We're putting it on in the form of water because it's all the rain runoff.
Right.
I mean, so we're creating a toxic mess hole.
Yeah, and actually, there's information out from the University of Purdue or Purdue University up in Indiana that actually shows that the herbicide can turn into a gaseous phase and be easily transmitted through the air.
Oh my! So now we're inhaling it, just being around it.
It can just get into the airstream, into the wind stream, and move.
So you have found this chemical-free hay, which your animals then are pretty. I'm sure they come up to you and say, "Thank you, Dr. Hill, for serving us so well," right? Or they just keep on. I mean, you really know too when they walk past, and you're like, "Man, I was downwind from that one," you know.
Well, actually, we don't have any foul smelling, like the things that you might traditionally associate, say, for example, like with a chicken farm or a hog farm or a feedlot, those types of smells that everyone knows are offensive. We don't deal with any of that stuff. Like, we never think about that.
That is amazing. Well, I think it goes back to when you have healthy soil, and that healthy microbiome in the soil would theoretically, go upstream into the healthy ecology of the GI tract of the species it's living on that property, right. And then wherever that animal goes and is consumed, and it doesn't even have to be animal. I mean, I'm sure you got produce out there too, mm-hmm. Correct?
Yes.
I mean, I know you said you got a vineyard and you've got some of those. My wife's really interested probably in the vineyard, and so we can talk about that at some point. But the reality is even the produce has an ecology in it, and that's all of those things we can bring into our bodies and maximize the expression of health.
So actually, since you brought up the vineyard, when your office staff were out at the farm, we had actually taken the chickens and sectioned them off around the vineyard. And the reason we did that is they were going through, they were picking the bugs, and they were providing their manure. So now we fertilized and we dealt with the pest issue all at the same time. And because of the increased growth in the grasses under the vines that came back, we'll continue to monitor that throughout the warmer months, but that's how we hold the water down in that area. And the more moisture we can keep in that environment, the more activity we can have from the microbiology, from the fungus, from the bacteria in the soil. It would be just like us not drinking water or not having any fluid consumption. At some point, we're going to get dehydrated.
Yeah.
You have to have the water available, and maintaining that lush, the grass growth under that is what allows us to be able to do that.
Man, and it's just amazing to me even though I kind of have an understanding and appreciation for this, because I've been to farms before and I've listened to, people talk about having the science down where the plant pops up out of the ground at that harvest level right after the bugs leave. Like they have it, timed really down to a art and a science. And it's just fascinating to think that that's even possible. But listening to you, all the different ways that you can maximize the soil ecology of your land, because you recognize and know that if you have good soil ecology, then all the livestock, all the produce have good, rich nutritional density. So, you're like going the extra mile for things that some people don't even appreciate as life. Because we're all self-centered and selfish a bit, right? So we think, well, I just care about me. Oh, really? Well, let's see your diet.
Right.
Oh, don't go there, Dr. Chop. I like my fast food. That fast food place just pulls me in, right? My daily convenience is just they're easy for me. You don't understand. Well, I thought you said that you care about yourself. And we're trying to educate people, right? This is one of the hardest things that you and I do in practice.
Yep.
Is to teach people that they're worth it. And I think that if people, when we listen to stories like you're painting this picture of life on the farm, I think that you can begin to listen to how the reflection now comes back to you to make a choice on how are you going to move forward with this new information. Right. If you're ignorant, we understand you're going to make some mistakes, but unfortunately, there's still consequences for being ignorant, isn't there?
There are.
So they say ignorance is bliss, but I'm not convinced. I think not knowing, because who doesn't love sinking their face into, all the delicacies of sugar and processed food. But man, if we could get people to recognize, if you could get your patients to recognize that their worth is paramount, that they were created by God Almighty. He knit them together in their mother's wombs. And we find that no one's teaching moms how to eat well so that they feed. Isn't there a transferable story in how you're caring for the soil in order to care for the animals that live on it, which ultimately cares for you and your family?
Right.
Right.
And remember, that was the whole reason I started this.
Yeah.
Right. I grew up farming. That was my early childhood. And I did want to go back to that environment, but I ultimately did this. My driving force were patients. Was why I wanted to get back out there and get them to reconnect. And I think, like you or I might look at this at this point in our life where we're at now, when we consume, say, a piece of grass-fed or finished meat, or we consume that pasture-raised chicken and we bite into that, and there's a satisfaction both not only at the level of our taste buds, but also in knowing that we made a choice that would sustain our health over the long term, right? There's a mental satisfaction in that. So we got that little dopamine release, right? That stimulated the front portion of our brain and created some pleasure there for us. That's what people are reaching for sugar for. Well, you don't have to constantly reach for sugar to get that same mental response. You just have to develop a new type of relationship with food.
Oh, so, and isn't that interesting? We have relationships with our food. I always tell patients that come in and tell me, well, my high cholesterol, my blood pressure is genetic because my doctor told me so, right? Or their doctor tells them, well, that's just what life's going to be like because you're getting older. Right. Sorry to be that guy to tell you that. But yet you and I come along and say, no. Your habits are familiar, meaning most people follow the same 10 to 11 meal plans that their moms and dads provided to them growing up. And then maybe they get a little bit of a hodgepodge of, husband, wife, family integration. But typically, the wife makes 80% of the health decisions for the family, grocery shopping decisions, all that stuff. So really, those 8 to 10 to 11 meal plans come from her side predominantly. And ultimately what's happening is people are just following a recipe of expressing gene high blood pressure or mismanagement of stress, anxiety, depression, whatever. And they're missing those opportunities that they don't even realize that they have a relationship with food. They don't realize that looking for the M&Ms or looking for the candy pop or the soda pop, that those things are creating a dopamine hit. That's like, whew, what? I'm manipulating my brain?
To me, this is almost this relationship with food. This is analogous to a marriage, right? No matter how long you've been married, you have to put some intention into that marriage. You have to nurture that marriage, right?
It's true.
And it's the same thing. And if you don't do that, it doesn't mean that the relationship isn't there. It's just not a healthy relationship.
That's right.
It's just not good. And that same story applies to food. You can actually put thought into food. You can develop that relationship, or ultimately the relationship that you do have with food is going to be to your detriment.
And whether you like it or not.
Yeah, it's going to happen.
And, we're wrapping up here, but I just wanted to bring, so you have been helping me with some different cool ecology tests in the office, and looking at people's ecology in the gut. And we had a particular patient in mind that really drove this this need for looking into different levels of diagnostics. And when you and I had talked about this lady's gut health, and it wasn't good. There was suspicion of, was it cancer? Was it ulcerative colitis? Was it Crohn's disease? An advanced disorder where somebody's got bloody stool. Like if you're walking in the cow pasture and you see bloody stool, you go, huh? Something's not right here. Well, if you saw that in 17 or 18 patties, you might go, what, Shaggy? I got a major problem.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, this gal had some major trouble, and we've been working hard at it for over, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. She's been working out even longer than that. But I remember having a conversation with her, and I called her, and I just said, look, I don't know who to send you to, and you're a little bit out of my league, but here's what I know is I always stand by these principles that if you stick with the program long enough, you'll make it. If you follow through the recommendations to the best of your ability, you'll make it. And if you stick with me, my determining factor, and I know you have the same heart, is that we're going to find a solution one way or the other, because you and I aren't arrogant enough to say that we can't go and ask for help.
Right.
And, and I came and got under, some of your tutelage on how to read these tests and gave me some ideas on what to do. And even the doses that we wanted to give this person, we couldn't give them. It was too much. But yet, even though the pace for which we got to the finish line, and we're not done, but we're way far down the success track here. She wanted to quit 1,000 times in the process. She was frustrated. Her husband was frustrated. Family was frustrated. Friends were frustrated. What you're doing is not working. What you're doing is not working. But yet every time, and this was the coolest thing, one of the cool things about this GI map test, it showed all these different antibiotics that they can't use.
Right.
And when she started, I said, just start all over. Tell me the story again. I'm missing something. And she told me the major flare that put her in the hospital, where she almost lost 18 inches of her colon or of her intestine. They had put her on antibiotics at an ER clinic, right? Because they don't do it as thorough as a job as a GI might do, or definitely not even close to some of the things that you and I are digging for, right, and asking questions around. I said, you know what? We've got this test, and this test shows us what your ecology looks like, and it's a mess. And you've got to evaluate your bowels. If you're sick, if you have symptom patterns that you weren't genetically born with, you better be looking at your GI tract, right?
Yep.
Well, I share this with you because here's the success part of the story. She doesn't have cancer. They looked at that. We called that ER. We found out that the antibiotics they put her on were the ones that she can't have, that spun her into a flare. She has been doing bone broths. I know you got bone broths out at the ranch. She can't eat protein per se at this point, but she can do bone broths. So we upped the bone broth ante because it's one of the most amazing nutritional foods, correct?
Correct.
Tell us just a little bit about bone broth. We're wrapping up, but this is just important to express the power of simple nutrition, because I think personally it was the bone broth that really pushed health into this care plan, because I really couldn't get a lot of our herbal nutrients in because of the sensitivity and the ecology of her gut.
Well, and what comes to mind for me immediately on this is not all bone broths are created equal.
Amen to that.
Right?
Yeah. And if you're buying it from the store, you're probably not getting what you're making on your ranch.
Right. And so the only reason I bring that as the initiating statement here is to say that when we look at what bone broth does offer, the minerals that are in there, since it is coming from the bone and that's such a mineral dense area, the various proteins. We know collagen is such a ubiquitous compound throughout the body. It's found pretty much everywhere throughout the body. And so literally, if you don't have that coming in some form and you don't have that nutrient density there, your immune system's not getting the support that it needs. You can't control inflammation the way that you would ideally want to be able to control that. You're not healing and restoring the membranes that line the gut wall. There's just a plethora of things that are not taking place that are essential steps in good health that bone broth can fill those voids.
Guys, and listen, as you come back to this and you listen to this show over and over again, I hope, or share it with your friends and family and loved ones, and you subscribe to the channel so that you can just stay up to date with what we call the most up-to-date health information available to you. We do this for you and to educate you. We're not even talking, we're scratching the surface on the power of bone broth.
We really are.
And so you're putting the time in to make these broths, and to not only, it's more than just restoration of the GI tract. It's restoring cellular activity and cellular function.
It is. Again, I go back to just how how widespread collagen is throughout the body. And I keep saying collagen. It's not even just the collagen part of that. It's the other nutrients that are also found in the bone broth as well that you just don't find in the same density from other food sources. And the fact that it's a liquid, it's easy to consume. It tastes really good, right?
Yeah.
My wife, and just to be fair to this conversation, I am not the one making the bone broth. She's the one making the bone broth.
It's a joint
right?
effort. It's a team.
I'm supported.
That's right. That's a good boy. He's smart.
I'm
Gardy,
supported.
you and I can take some notes on marriage advice on how to keep it going. That's good.
But again, it's coming from those same class of animals, right? I mean, all the intention that we talked about in terms of raising or getting to that cut of beef also comes into play when we're talking about that broth.
Do you sell just bones and stuff like that? Like if I wanted to make my own broths, or do y'all use everything and y'all make your own broths?
We have enough production that we do have the availability of selling the bones themselves.
Tell the listeners just how they can get a hold of the ranch and make sure that they're tapping into, because I'm assuming y'all can ship and y'all have a level of, well, if we can't get out there, but we can still, as city folk, can get to it.
Do you trust UPS?
Well, I don't know, dude. I agree. I mean, it goes back to what are they doing behind the closed door?
Yeah, so food, and as much time and effort as it takes to produce that food, we don't like taking a chance with it. So I'm not trying to pick on UPS or FedEx or any other courier, right? But the reason I say that is that for the greater Houston area, we actually deliver directly to them.
Oh.
So we will bring
Rad.
it to your doorstep.
Wow.
Okay.
So even one better, right? And so that way it is
way better.
It is going directly from our hands to your hands.
Okay. So that's fantastic. So tell us how we can get a hold of you, and that way we can tap into, give us your website, number, whatever contact that we can, because we definitely have people that are going to, they're tapped in here right now. I see a lot of loves and thumbs up and high fiving happening on the social media live stream. But as you go back and listen, I want people to always be able to give you guys a call and reach out and stay in contact.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate that. So first, let me just say this. We are all about transparency. And so to initiate that view of transparency, go to harvesthillsranch.com, and that's hills with an S, harvesthillsranch.com, and you'll be able to see the videos that we shoot about what we do, how we do it, why we do it. So our big why, we tell you all about our big why. And then we also have a Cooking with Leah page up there, which is my wife showing you how to prepare these. So if you have apprehension about, I don't know what to do with this, well, we're helping you out with that too.
Yeah, absolutely cool.
And then you can click right on the shop tab. You'll see it right on the homepage there. And then from that, you'll be able to go into the online store. You'll see the different types of beef boxes, chicken boxes, mixed meat boxes that we have, the different bundles that are available for the broths and the eggs. And you place your order there, and like I said, we'll tell you exactly when we're going to be in your area, and we'll bring it right to you.
Man, guys, I hope that you guys are excited. I mean, I am literally tickled pink. I want to come and see this live, and I'm sure y'all, I don't know if you have it up on the website, but I mean, y'all do live demos where y'all bring people out and educate them, right?
We do. We like to make this a day event, so we don't do a lot of these every year. We tend to do about 2 a year, but we make it a big deal. We make it fun when folks come out, and our next one is going to be October 9th.
Okay, cool. So that'll be like a winter, extravaganza, going into the fall and whatnot, and that'd be kind of cool to see the ranch shifting gears.
Well, when we show you the ranch, you're going to be doing some walking, so we don't figure many people want to walk in July, August, and early September.
That's probably wise.
Yes.
I'm sure there's some mental fortitude that went into that. It must have been from your bride, right?
Without question.
Of course. Well, guys, this is Living Well Clinical Nutrition Center. I hope that you guys stay tuned in and subscribe to the channel and be with us every Tuesday. We're here live on social media streams. We're on our YouTube channel, on our podcast channel. You can catch the show if you missed it. You can share the show with your friends, family, and loved ones. We desire at Living Well Clinical Nutrition Center to bring you the most up-to-date health and wellness information available so that you, your family, can appreciate another level of what it takes to get well, stay well, and be well. through food, through education, and through information. Tonight at 6:30, we have a class on Eat This, Not That at our office in League City, Texas. So give us a call, 281-554-8600 if you need some information, directions. You can visit our website at justlivewell.com and make sure that you are there. You're going to love the information. We are constantly updating and giving out new information. Some of it is, fundamentally the same, but yet we have evolved it and we continue to tweak it. This weekend, me and my whole clinical team were at the, sitting with doctors from around the country, learning diet ideas and neurological, how that empowers the neurological system in our body to enhance your bones, to enhance your mind, to enhance the muscles, to enhance the visceral organ systems in your body to perform and work better. We never stop learning. We want to grow and learn so that we can help people grow in who they are and find the best version of them. So as we shut down today, Gardy, was there any questions that we needed to make sure that we answered that people
There was like 50 questions we didn't get a chance to ask or answer.
Well, maybe we could get one. I don't know if we got time, but if we got time for one.
Let's go ahead. So this one was from Molly, and I thought it was a really good question. She said, do you ever see the need for antibiotics or medicine in your animals? What do you use for sick chickens?
So we don't use antibiotics. We don't use any chemicals on our farm, period. When we have a chicken that's sick, apple cider vinegar works miracles.
How much apple cider vinegar?
We do it free choice. So we let the animal consume it. We mix it with some water. We may put a little bit of silver in there with it for that antimicrobial effect. But keep in mind, guys, we're talking about the reactionary side of this. There's also a proactive side of this to where the animal doesn't get there in the first place.
Sure.
And we create the habitat for that animal in their environment where those things are minimized. I'm not saying they don't ever happen, but we rarely run into this. And then we're also, by virtue of any, whether it's the minerals or other things that the birds are fed, we're very attentive to that as well. So we're doing things to keep their inherent immune system up as strong as possible.
Okay, so here's another question. This is from Michelle. She said, I don't have room for a whole chicken. Can you buy just the parts you need? And then I have a question. What if you live outside the Houston area? Because there's people that tune in all over the country. Is that something that y'all will do to ship?
So we don't outside of the Houston area right now. So part of the reason for that is there's two answers to this question. So the first is that it's the expense of doing that to make sure that it gets there in a timely manner. Most people aren't willing to deal with the expense. It's very expensive right now. The other reason that we're not really big fans of doing that is that we want people to connect with local farmers in their environment, right? Truthfully, I'm not trying to feed the world. I'm trying to feed my community. And so we want people to connect with farmers in their area that have a operation similar or of like mind to what we do and develop that relationship with them.
Okay, that's cool. So can they order, if they don't have like a whole chicken, can they order parts of the chicken? Or I'm guessing that's the same with the cows and stuff too.
Yeah, so we do cuts. We don't force individuals to buy, say, like a half cow, quarter cow, whole cow, that type of thing. That's not our business model, and we do end up cutting all of our chickens into parts. So you can buy the chicken breast, the thighs, the wings, drumsticks.
Just like we had. I mean, and no doubt about it, dude. I mean, I've eaten it all, and I even rationalize it with myself. Well, I mean, I just can't get access to it. But the reality is, I mean, your packaging was, I mean, there was plenty to eat, and we literally were like, this is so good. We wanted to stuff ourselves. I mean, we had an issue of like, okay, wait a second. There is a consumption. Like, it's okay that we can buy more, right? We can reproduce this.
Right.
I mean, it was so good. Oh man, it made my teeth sweat. It was so good, man. It made me happy.
Thank you for that feedback.
Yeah, it's great.
Here's another good question. This is from Crystal. She said, what role does population density of your livestock play in the health of your animals?
We do attend to that, and this is where the example I can go back here is looking at the cattle. This is getting into some of the nuances of cattle raising, but we have what we call stock density versus things like stock rate. We don't really need to delve too far into all that stuff, but we pay attention to those things. And again, we're paying attention to the number of animals that we have per acre, but it's not necessarily just about trying to hit a specific number. It's about watching my pastures and actually seeing how those animals are using that forage, making sure that we're not running into a trend for, say, 30, 60, 90 days ahead where we're going to run up short on forage. So we pay attention to that. And then as far as the density on those animals, we keep our animals in that herd mentality. In the industry, this is known as mob grazing. So we like to keep them in tighter groups to mimic the herds of nature and how they would naturally move.
Wow. I mean, I just kind of, think about the going back to the mineral trough. Should we have like a mineral trough for our pets at home? And if so, what would we? I mean, obviously, it's not going to be as big as what you're describing. It doesn't have to be, but what should we put down there? And would they? I mean, what I'm hearing is if we could allow them to innately, go and grab what they need, it goes to this proactivity level of keeping your chickens or your beef or your ducks healthy. Like, I want to keep my pups healthy. I want to keep my, my four-legged fur babies healthy. And I know there's people out there that absolutely, positively care about their animals more than they care about themselves.
Yeah, that's true.
What could we put down on the ground to make sure that they have access? I mean, could I put some apple cider vinegar in water? Would they drink it?
I think you always have to look at that and just try. Some of this is a bit of trial and error, right? Especially with different species of animals. If you do try the apple cider vinegar, I can give you a word of caution. Do not put it in anything metal. It will rust it.
Oh.
And no matter how much you dilute it, don't do that.
Okay. Wow.
Learn that the hard way. It's an acid, right?
Yeah.
Acetic acid. So I should have realized that before I poured it in the trough. But nonetheless... So foundation is key here. So we're talking about the last step in the process with the mineral trough, but ahead of that, we have the forage, the quality forage that they consume. We also use an unrefined sea salt blend from an ancient seabed out of Kansas that we literally ship that in, and we make a brine for them with that. And so they're using that, and they're creating a foundation of minerals. So now they're only using the trough to make up those differences that come about as a virtue of their individualism or something in the environment not being ideal for them at that time, right?
So when you make a brine, you're just putting this in water, boiling it?
No. We don't boil it. It's just literally taking the unrefined sea salt and putting it in a trough of water, and then they consume it. We give them fresh water, we give them the brine water, and they have access to choose between which ones they want.
Whoa, cool. And then if it sits there long enough, you just drain it and start over fresh.
We just pour it, because it's diluted at that point, right? We're not using an excessive amount of salt. It's about a quart per 50 gallons. But we can just slowly pour some of that out on the pasture and distribute it across, because it's just adding minerals to the pasture.
So nothing gets wasted.
Nothing gets wasted.
Dude, I'm so glad that you came down and shared your passion. I mean, it's obvious that you just got a heart for the soil, for your animals, for food and nourishing humans back to better health through reconnecting. So, I mean, I love that you said that you have a restorative farm. And so, just God bless Harvest Hills, man. That's really legit. And I'm really excited that we had an opportunity to connect and just, talk through how we need to recondition our thinking and our relationships with our food. Because if you build a better relationship with food and you appreciate that it isn't the dollar that drives what you should be consuming, it's you as a molecular being, a cellular being that is expressing the best that it has to express to the world around it. That comes through your choices of what you put in your mouth through food, what you breathe and drink, and then what you breathe in, what you're bathing in, all those things. So I think this has just been an important, amazing conversation to have. And so, again, I'm just thrilled to have you on the show. And, man, we'll do it again.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, if I can maybe twist Guardian Kurt's arm, maybe I can get him to come up to the ranch. We'll just have a little private, tour. We'll chop it up and make all kinds of fun videos.
That'd be fun.
That'd be legit.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to go to Hillister, Texas.
I'm sure you have. I mean, you always wanted to go to a real community, right?
I love communities, yeah. So the thing that sticks out to me is Dr. Hill at Harvest Hills in Hillister, Texas. Was that on purpose?
It was not. It all just fell into fruit. Into
perfect design, dude. It's
right?
So good. Well, guys, God bless you all. We'll check you on the flip side. Remember, every Tuesday, 9 to 10, we are here live on social media, YouTube, Facebook. We are on the air on on 99.5 FM. If you cannot catch the show live, no sweat. Just subscribe to our social media platforms and make certain that you share, like, and comment so that you can stay up to date, that you can get the best of the best when it comes to health, wellness, and nutritional information so that you can feel good, live good, and age well all the days of your life. So God bless you all. We'll check you on the flip side.
So you can go to harvesthillsrange.com. You can also go to justlivewell.com or search Just Live Well on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and catch up on all the episodes with Dr. Chapa.
All right.